If you have been buying camera gear for years, you already know that a low price does not always mean good value. Some cheap lenses are soft, poorly built, or quickly replaced once their limitations become obvious. But spending more is not automatically the answer either. A good affordable lens should give you dependable autofocus, useful image quality, and a real reason to stay in your camera bag. So today, we are looking at 10 cheap camera lenses that are actually worth buying in 2026. And number 1 may be the smartest replacement for the kit lens you already own. You are watching AltBuzz Lenses, where we look beyond the price tag and focus on the lenses photographers will actually use. And if that sounds like your kind of channel, this is a good moment to subscribe before we begin. At number 10, we have the Viltrox AF 26mm f2.8 EVO, currently priced around $299, subject to mount and retailer, and available for Sony E full frame and Nikon Z full frame. Some photographers want to carry a full frame camera without carrying the bulk that usually comes with it. That is the problem this lens quietly solves. It brings full frame coverage, autofocus, a compact pancake-style build, low weight, metal construction, and physical controls, all at a price well below most premium compact primes. Bodies like the Sony A7C series or the Nikon Z FE suddenly feel far easier to live with day to day, especially for street photography, travel, family moments, and everyday documentary work. Slip it into a jacket pocket, and the whole idea of a heavy full-frame kit starts to feel outdated. For many owners, this is the first time their full-frame camera has ever felt genuinely portable. The Viltrox 26mm does not ask you to replace your camera with something smaller. It simply makes the full-frame camera you already own easier to carry. But it is still a relatively new design, so long-term reliability and firmware support are less proven than older Sony, Nikon, Sigma, or Tamron lenses, and its aperture, while practical, is not especially fast. Think of it less as a specialist tool and more as the lens you reach for when you simply do not want to think about gear at all. It rewards patience with sample consistency still building a track record, so tempered expectations serve you well here. But if your real problem is not size, but the slow aperture of the kit zoom, Canon still offers one of the simplest affordable upgrades. At number 9, we have the Canon RF 50mm f1.8 STM, priced around $219 depending on promotions, compatible with Canon RF full frame and Canon RF APS-C bodies, where the field of view tightens into a short portrait perspective. The kit zoom that came with your Canon is simply too slow for indoor shooting, portraits, or real background separation. This lens changes that instantly. It offers a bright aperture, full frame coverage, small size, dependable autofocus, and that familiar normal focal length photographers have trusted for generations. It is one of the lowest cost ways to make an EOS R camera produce a genuinely different look from the standard kit lens. For many Canon shooters, this is the very first lens that teaches them what a wide aperture can actually do to a photograph. It is proof that a meaningful upgrade does not always require a meaningful expense. The RF 50mm f1.8 is not Canon's finest 50. It is the affordable lens that reminds photographers why a simple fast prime has remained useful for decades. The trade-off is basic construction, modest autofocus refinement, softer corners at wide apertures, and no weather sealing. But for the price, that compromise is easy to accept. It will not impress a lab technician, but it will absolutely impress the person seeing their portrait for the first time. Sometimes the simplest lens in the lineup ends up being the one people reach for most. Canon's 50 is the familiar bargain. Fujifilm's next lens takes a different approach, stripping away materials and controls while preserving the part that matters most, the image. At number 8, we have the Fujifilm XC 35mm f2, priced around $239, built for Fujifilm's X-mount APS-C cameras. Fujifilm users face a different question. How much should they pay for exterior controls they may never need? This lens answers that question by giving up the aperture ring and premium build found on pricier Fujifilm glass, while keeping the image quality that actually matters. You get a field of view close to 53mm on full frame, a useful aperture, low weight, and respectable optical performance, ideal for street photography, travel, food, and everyday portraits. It disappears on the front of a small Fujifilm body the way a proper everyday lens should. There is something freeing about carrying glass this unassuming and still walking away with photographs you are proud of. The XC 35mm feels inexpensive in the hand, but the photographs do not carry the same warning label. Just know what you are giving up. No aperture ring, no weather sealing, no stabilization, and none of the premium XF series build quality. If you value traditional Fujifilm controls, the XF version may suit you better. But if the photograph is what matters most to you, this lens rarely lets that priority down. It is a quiet reminder that plastic construction and genuine image quality are not mutually exclusive. But some photographers do not want a traditional 50mm view. Nikon's next lens sits between 35 and 50, and that small difference makes it unusually easy to live with. At number 7, we have the NIKKOR Z 40mm f2, priced around $277. Compatible with Nikon Z full-frame cameras and Nikon Z DX bodies, where the effective field of view narrows further. 40mm sits in a quiet, underappreciated space between the traditional 35 and 50, wide enough for everyday scenes, tight enough for environmental portraits. This lens is compact, lightweight, brings a genuinely useful aperture, and offers an affordable entry point into Nikon Z system primes. For Nikon ZF, Z5, and Z6 series owners, it turns a heavier full-frame body into something that feels far less demanding across a long day of shooting. It is the kind of lens you forget is even attached, right up until you look back at the photographs. And that is exactly the point, a lens that gets out of the way and simply lets you shoot. The Nikon 40mm f2 earns its value by making the camera easier to bring, easier to handle, and easier to enjoy. It is not an S-line lens, so its optical correction and edge performance sit below Nikon's premium primes, but as a practical everyday companion, it does exactly what it needs to do. Nobody buys this lens to impress another photographer. They buy it to actually use their camera more often. And in the long run, the lens you actually carry beats the one left at home every single time. Small primes improve portability, but they do not help when the subject is across a field, on a stage, or at the far end of the garden. At number 6, we have the Tamron 70-300mm f4.5 to 6.3 Diox III-RXD, recently available around $369 for the Sony E version, with Nikon Z pricing that may differ, so always check the current listing for your specific mount. This is where the story shifts. The photographer wants genuine telephoto reach, but cannot justify a professional lens built for working photographers. This Tamron opens the door anyway, delivering 300mm of reach, full-frame coverage, and dependable autofocus, without the size or cost of a 100 to 400mm or 70 to 200mm lens. Think birds in the garden, a family event outdoors, a distant landscape compressed into something dramatic, or your first real attempt at wildlife photography. It is the lens that quietly turns an ordinary weekend walk into an opportunity worth carrying a camera for. Suddenly, the fence at the edge of the garden is not the limit of what you can photograph anymore. The Tamron 70-300mm is not professional sports glass. It is an affordable way to bring distant subjects into the photograph without bringing a very large lens into your life. There is no optical image stabilization built in, and the aperture is relatively slow, so it performs best in good daylight rather than fast indoor action. Pair it with a bright afternoon, and it earns its keep almost immediately. A steady hand and good light will take this lens further than the specifications suggest. If you appreciate lens recommendations based on long-term value rather than marketing hype, This is a good moment to subscribe to Alt Buzz Lenses, because the next 4 lenses only get more interesting. Telephoto Reach lets you photograph distant subjects. The next lens solves the opposite problem, creating flattering portraits on smaller APS-C cameras. At number 5, we have the Sigma 56mm f1.4 DCDN Contemporary, priced around $454, though pricing varies by mount. Available across Sony APS-C, Canon RF APS-C, Fujifilm X, Nikon ZDX, Micro Four Thirds, and L-mount APS-C. For APS-C portraits, changing the lens may matter more than changing the camera. On a crop sensor, this focal length produces a field of view close to a traditional portrait lens, and paired with a wide aperture, it delivers strong subject separation that most kit zooms simply cannot reach. It is compact, useful in low light, and available across nearly every current mirrorless mount, making it one of the most versatile portrait tools on this list. The background practically melts away, and that alone changes how a portrait feels the moment you open the file. It is the kind of transformation that makes photographers wonder why they waited so long to try a prime. The Sigma 56mm f1.4 proves that better portraits do not always require a larger sensor or a new camera. The trade-off is a focal length too tight for small rooms, no optical stabilization, and a specialist rather than general-purpose range. But for weddings, beauty work, and indoor people photography, it earns its place easily. It is not a lens for everything, but for the one thing it does, few affordable options do it better. Buy it knowing exactly why you bought it, and it will never disappoint you. The Sigma provides strong portrait value through aperture. Nikon's next lens earns its place through something different: premium optical performance at a temporary non-premium price. At number 4, we have the NIKKOR Z 50mm f1.8s, recently available around $467 during promotions, though the regular price runs considerably higher, so always verify current pricing before treating this as a bargain. At number 4, cheap becomes a question of timing, because this lens only qualifies when discounted. Unlike the traditional inexpensive 50mm lenses photographers grew up with, this is a full S-line design, meaning strong sharpness, controlled aberrations, consistent performance across the frame, and quiet, precise focusing suited to high-resolution bodies like the Nikon Z7 or Z8. This is the rare case where patience, not compromise, becomes the buyer's greatest advantage. Wait for the right sale, and you are essentially getting professional glass at hobbyist pricing. The Nikon Z 50mm f1.8s is not cheap because Nikon designed it cheaply. It becomes a bargain when a premium lens is sold at an ordinary lens price. It is larger and less portable than Nikon's own 40mm, and its value depends entirely on catching the right promotion. But when that window opens, the quality on offer is difficult to match at this price. Watch the listings closely, because this bargain does not announce itself loudly. It rewards the photographer who is willing to wait rather than the one who buys on impulse. Prime lenses improve quality and aperture, but for wildlife and distant subjects, the most valuable specification is still reach. At number 3, we have the Canon RF 100-400mm f5.6-8 IS USM, priced around $749. Subject to promotional changes, compatible with Canon RF full-frame and Canon RF APS-C bodies, where the effective reach becomes considerably longer on cameras, like the R7, R10, and R50. 400mm is rarely inexpensive, which changes how value must be judged here. This lens cannot compete with Canon's large white L-series telephotos on paper, but it was never meant to. What it offers instead is genuine reach, optical image stabilization, fast focusing, manageable weight, and close focus capability, all wrapped into a lens that will not exhaust your shoulders on a long day photographing birds, wildlife, or outdoor sport. On a crop body, that reach stretches even further, turning a distant subject into a genuinely usable frame. For anyone who has ever hesitated at the weight of a professional white telephoto, this lens exists specifically for that moment of hesitation. The Canon RF 100 to 400mm makes long lens photography easier, not only on the budget, but also on the shoulders. Its narrower aperture at the long end means it performs best in daylight, and it lacks the robust build of Canon's professional glass. But for the reach it delivers, that compromise feels reasonable. Most photographers who buy this lens never once wish they had spent 3 times as much. It simply gets out of the way and lets the subject fill the frame. The Canon gives excellent value by reaching farther. The next lens earns its position by covering the focal range where many photographers do most of their work. At number 2, we have the Tamron 28 to 75mm f2.8 DAF III-A VXD Generation 2. Recently available around $699 for the Sony E version, with Nikon Z pricing that may vary, so confirm the current version before treating any price as fixed. The next lens costs more, but may replace several purchases. This is the rare lens on this list capable of becoming someone's primary working lens. A constant bright aperture, a practical range stretching from standard to short portrait, strong autofocus, close focusing, and a build quality that feels genuinely professional, all at a fraction of the cost and weight of a premium standard zoom. For weddings, events, travel, and paid assignments, it can replace the mental math of choosing between 3 different primes. Once it is mounted, the temptation to keep switching lenses simply fades away. Many photographers who buy this lens quietly stop shopping for anything else. The Tamron 28 to 75mm f2.8 is valuable because it can replace several smaller decisions with one dependable lens. It begins at 28mm rather than 24, so wide interiors and large groups are less comfortable, and it carries no stabilization of its own. But as a single serious zoom, few lenses on this list work harder for their price. This is the closest thing on this countdown to a lens you could simply leave on the camera and forget about. It earns trust the way only a genuinely reliable tool can. But the number 1 lens is not designed for a professional full-frame camera. It earns the top position because it transforms the inexpensive cameras most people are actually buying. At number 1, we have the Sigma 18 to 50mm f2.8 DC DN Contemporary, priced between roughly $599 and $659, depending on mount and retailer. Available for Sony E APS-C, Canon RF APS-C, Fujifilm X, and L-mount APS-C cameras. Number 1 is for the viewer who already owns a capable camera and does not want to replace it. The standard kit zoom that came bundled with an APS-C mirrorless body is almost always too slow, too limiting in low light, and too flat in its rendering. This Sigma changes the equation entirely. With a constant bright aperture, a genuinely practical zoom range, compact dimensions, close focusing, and image quality that noticeably outperforms the kit lens it was built to replace. All while staying small enough to preserve the very reason many people chose a compact mirrorless system in the first place. It is, in many ways, the lens the camera should have shipped with from the beginning. Mount it once, and the difference is immediate enough that you may never look at the kit lens the same way again. The Sigma 18 to 50mm f2.8 is number 1 because it does not ask you to replace a perfectly good camera. It simply allows that camera to perform far beyond the limits of the original kit lens. It covers APS-C only, has no stabilization of its own, and stops at 50mm, so full-frame owners should look elsewhere. But for the photographer this list was written for, it is the single most meaningful upgrade on this countdown. Buy the camera for the size. Buy this lens for everything the camera was always capable of. It is not a glamorous purchase, but it may be the smartest one on this entire list. It is not the cheapest lens here. It is simply the lens most likely to produce the largest practical improvement for an owner of an affordable APS-C mirrorless camera. Now we want to hear from you. What is the most affordable lens you have owned that remained in your camera bag for years, long after cheaper alternatives were forgotten? And which current camera system do you think gives photographers the best value in lenses today? Leave your answer below. Some of the best recommendations on this channel have come directly from viewers who have been doing this far longer than we have. The cheapest lens is never automatically the best bargain, and the most expensive one is rarely the wisest purchase either. A good affordable lens does not need to win every laboratory test. It needs to improve the camera you already own, remain useful long after the novelty disappears, and justify every dollar you spent on it. That is the only test that ever really mattered. If you enjoy practical lens guides built around value, usability, and real photography, subscribe to Alt Buzz Lenses, and we will see you in the next one.